What if we could have a new vision for the workplace? A vision where people could be themselves, belong to something bigger, and become who they were meant to be. This isn't the vision statement of a socially conscious startup or a Fortune 500 company. It's the vision statement of a small 200-person faith-based community in Baltimore that my husband and I have been a part of for the past 8 years. It's been a powerful and healing and connected community that has helped me find myself, helped me strengthen my relationships, and helped me become more of who I'm meant to be. So I've wondered, what would it look like if we were to apply a vision like this to the workplace, to invite people to be, belong, and become? So let's start with being. I've had the opportunity to work at the same organization in some capacity for 15 years. I started as an intern in college, and I've worked my way up to a director-level position. My dad, actually both my parents are entrepreneurs, and my father is a management consultant and my mom's a financial planner, and my dad introduced me to the man who is the owner of our company, who he's known for 30 years, and he said, I think you might like this guy and enjoy working for him. Why don't you check it out? And I had no idea that I would still be there 15 years later. But when you treat your interns really well, sometimes they stick around, and so it kind of worked. And I've had amazing opportunities, and I've had permission to grow and pursue my passions, and I've been given autonomy, and I've had experiences that I never would have imagined possible, and it's been really wonderful. But success can have a dark side, and I've always been someone who's pushed myself to strive and to achieve and perform and impress people. You see, I didn't really fit in very well with my peers growing up, and so I found my value in being useful and being smart. And so I took that with me from my school years all the way through, college, early years of my career, and it seemed to be working for me. I was winning awards and getting recognized and getting all the things that I thought made me valuable and made me worthy in some way. And all of this pressure that I put on myself really weighed on me. It weighed on me, and what it caused me to do was to hide the portions of myself that I thought people might reject, or anything that made me appear to be inadequate or incompetent in some way. I was terrified that anyone would see that, because I had to be the one to have it all together and to hold the world on my shoulders and to keep everyone else together too. I put this immense pressure on myself, and it caused me to hide. And it really came to a head earlier this year when in February I was diagnosed with an acute form of mono called Epstein-Barr virus. And it's really a horrible illness, and I was completely wiped out. And it gave me, interestingly, a lot of time to reflect. It ended up being a gift, because I wouldn't have slowed myself down otherwise. I wouldn't have paused and paid attention and listened. And so what it did is it gave me the opportunity to do that and to realize some things about how I was living my life that weren't really aligned with the core of who I was. And I noticed that over the past few years, what had happened is I had fallen out of connection with many of the people I work with, because I had gotten so much in my own head and so focused on performing and making sure that people were impressed by me, that I had fallen out of authentic connection with them, and it really hurt. I would avoid the lunchroom, and I wouldn't be involved in meetings, and I was working from home as much as I possibly could because the pain of being disconnected was so great. And so I decided I wanted to do something differently. I read a book called An Everyone Culture by Lisa Leahy and Bob Keegan out of Harvard University. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you read a book and you just feel so compelled to do something. And so I read the book over the weekend, and on Monday morning I said, I've got to start having these conversations with people. And so I reached out to someone who I'd had a tiff with the past couple weeks, so not the first person I was really excited to talk about, but that's who came to mind. So I said, well, let's just go for it. So I asked her for 10 minutes of her time, and I sat down in her office and I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being selfish. I'm sorry for being defensive. I'm sorry for focusing more on me and less on we. I'm sorry for being inconsiderate and for making your job harder instead of easier. I'm sorry. I told her that so much of my behavior was tied to this belief that I had in myself that I had to hold it all together, and I had to be the one that knew, and I had to be the expert, and I couldn't at any point say, you know what, I'm not sure what the answer is. That was too hard for me to do. But I told her I don't want to be that way anymore. It's too painful to hide like that. It's too difficult to live that life. And her response shocked me. See, this is someone in a director-level position on the operations team. And she was willing to take off her mask too. She said, Rachel, I didn't go to college. I always feel like I'm trying to prove myself. I'm just waiting 10 years to retirement, hoping no one is looking over my shoulder, realizing that I don't really belong, that I might be incompetent, that maybe I can't really do this. And she said, the more I talk to people, the more I realize everyone's afraid of the same thing. Like, we're all afraid of being found out. We're all afraid of being found out as an imposter, of having the mask removed, of having someone see the ugliness in us, the parts of ourselves that we really don't want to acknowledge are there. And so the bravery that she had, that she responded with, we exchanged tears and hugs and all of that, and it was just this immediate moment of connection. It went from complete disconnection to total connection because both of us were willing to be vulnerable. If one person takes a risk, it invites other people and gives other people permission to take that risk too. And I found that in that moment. It was so incredibly powerful and healing for me. Google's Project Aristotle studied 180 high-performing teams. They found that the number one criteria for high-performing teams is psychological safety. This is having permission to make mistakes, to speak up without being punished or embarrassed or ridiculed. It means that we can be the furthest thing from our put-together selves and still be valued and included and have worth. And it can be challenging at some organizations to think that something like this is possible. Like, I could never have a conversation like that, right? Maybe you're feeling that. I could never have that kind of conversation. I would just invite you to start with someone that you feel somewhat safe with. And think about, what is it that you're afraid of and why are you not sharing it? Because I will tell you, it is more painful to hold on to that than it is to take the risk to release it. What happens when we are psychologically safe is that creativity and innovation emerge. We're more collaborative and we have a desire to connect. People open up because they're not so focused on protecting and preserving their egos and identities anymore. And this is where businesses can be truly successful. So we want to focus on what we can do, what part that we can take to start that process. Maybe it's getting curious, noticing without judging, asking questions. If you feel really sure about a way of thinking, perhaps you go to someone that maybe you ordinarily would not ask their opinion and say, I have this thought, but I'm wondering, what do you think? What are some things I should consider that maybe I'm not thinking about? Most people they'd be shocked, right, to have someone actually ask them that question and wait for the answer. So I would invite you and encourage you to do that in your own life. That's what being is, having that permission to be ourselves. When we feel like we can be ourselves, we automatically feel like we belong. Don't you find that the people that you really can be yourself with, you just feel a sense of belonging, a sense of community, a sense of connection? We are hardwired for connection. If you think about it, like the very way that we come into existence is through two people connecting. Don't think about it too much, but right? This is what it is. This is what connection is. But so many people, just like I was feeling, are out of connection, and so many people are dealing with loneliness. And the Boston Globe and Harvard Business Review have headlines about this. They're saying the biggest threat to middle-aged men isn't obesity and smoking. It's loneliness. Increasing cases of burnout aren't just due to exhaustion. They're due to loneliness and a lack of meaningful human connection. This is profound stuff. The Harvard Adult Development Study studied the same population of about 700 men for the past 80 years or so. And they were looking at what different factors affect health outcomes and happiness. And they found that the greatest predictors of health at age 80 wasn't the cholesterol numbers at age 50. It wasn't their blood pressure. It was the quality of their relationships. And quality relationships are rooted in vulnerability, this permission to be who we are without fear of being rejected. Maybe you can think of someone in your life who is this person for you, or this community of quality relationships that you have around you. We need this. We need to feel like we are connected. We need to feel like we are surrounded by people who genuinely care about us. This is part of the community at my workplace, SIG. This was us after a scavenger hunt in Baltimore earlier this year. We have a lot of fun together. We work together, and we play together, and we serve together, and we do life together. We have baby showers and bridal showers and bachelor parties and bachelorette parties, and we really get to know each other's lives in an intimate way. There's a reason I've been there for so long. And this community of people genuinely cares about each other, and it starts at the top. It starts with our CEO, Richard. A couple of years ago, he was watching a news story of a millionaire in Pittsburgh giving away $100 bills at Christmas time, going into stores and giving them to total strangers. And he was really touched by this, and so he decided that he was going to take $100 and go visit his friend Scotty in Rehoboth Beach in Delaware. Scotty is a homeless Vietnam vet who hangs out at the Starbucks in Rehoboth. And most people kind of, walk by and ignore him. These people, we act like they're not there. But Richard has struck up an uncommon friendship with him. And they've shared stories, and he's really gotten to know him. And so he took $100 and gave it to Scotty. And Scotty was just overcome with emotion. He couldn't believe someone would be so generous. And you know what his first thought was? The first thing he wanted to do was to share the money with his friends and go to a lobster dinner. He wanted to take 4 of his friends to a lobster, and he wanted to give it away. Here's someone who has, by our standards, nothing. And the first thing he thought to do was to give it away. But the story gets even better, because what Richard did next at our final all-hands meeting of the year in 2015, he stood up and, through holding back tears, was telling us the story and pulled out an envelope with $100 bills. And he said, I was so impacted by this experience that I want all of you to have the opportunity to experience it too. And with that, he gave each one of us a $100 bill and a handwritten thank you note. It was so incredibly powerful, and the stories started coming in. The clerk at Wawa, someone's daycare provider, a serviceman returning from duty overseas, the maintenance men in our building. They really hit the jackpot. But it was incredible to see how one person's generosity just had this incredible ripple effect. And I decided that I wanted to give my money to a family at my church, a family with 3 young children that are basically on 2 teachers' salaries. And I felt it put on my heart that after the Christmas Eve service, I went up to them and I told them the story and I handed them the money. And they said, we just took our car to the shop and we didn't know how we were going to pay for it. So I texted my boss and I told him what happened, and he said, give him another 100. So the next week I show up at church and I pull him aside again. I'm like, this might be kind of weird, but I told my boss about you guys. He wanted me to give you another $100. So they look at me kind of incredulously and they're like, who do you work for? It was such a powerful experience that my company gave me the opportunity to feel something. How often are you giving the people that work with you and for you the opportunity to feel something like that, to belong to something bigger, to make a contribution in a meaningful way? Belonging is about extending kindness and gratitude and love and thoughtfulness to other people. It's about noticing people. How many people are walking around and they just feel unseen and they feel unnoticed and they feel unheard? So many people, and it's a painful place to be. So I would invite you to pay attention to people and to think about what you can do to offer this sense of belonging and to be generous, extend this generosity to people. Be, belong, become. All of us have a desire to become, and becoming is about growth, and it's about transformation and learning and recognizing that every human being is capable of evolving. All of us have a desire to become who we're meant to be and to fulfill our potential. And sometimes it's like peeling back the layers of an onion. It can be uncomfortable, and sometimes we can cry in the process. I had an experience, a transformational experience earlier this year with a friend and colleague of mine, Rosie Ward, who invited me to go through a process, again, that came out of Harvard and Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy's work called Immunity to Change. And so what we did is we started with a personal development goal. And coming off of the burnout, this was in March, and so I had just come off of being like the sickest that I had been. And I said, I want to set boundaries and learn to say no. And so after we established what this personal development goal was, then we looked at what are the things I'm doing and not doing around that behavior. Well, I'm overcommitting. I'm looking at all the shiny pennies, and I'm saying, yes, 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 I want all of them. And I'm exhausting myself in the process. And I'm becoming overwhelmed because I'm committing to too many things. And then the next thing we did was look at, what's the worry box? What are all the things I'm afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of missing out on something, right? FOMO. I'm afraid of not being the go-to expert. I'm afraid that if I don't push myself as hard, I will lose my edge. And then we looked at, what are the hidden commitments underneath of that? So I had to convert the worries to commitments. So I commit to being the go-to expert. I commit to never missing out on any opportunity. I commit to pushing myself because if I don't, then I won't achieve. And I looked at that list and I said, I don't want to commit to those things. That's not who I want to be. That's not who I am at my core. And then the next question she asked got to the core of the issue, and she said, what are the big assumptions underlying those commitments? I said, well, if I'm not the go-to person, if I'm not the expert, then I won't matter. And she said, what's underneath of that? What's beneath that assumption? I said, I won't be good enough to be loved. And it was a painful realization and something I'd been carrying with me my whole life, that my usefulness is what made me valuable, and that being smart is what made me worthy. And I have to say, the greatest gift of going through this experience has been the love that I have felt in my life in the past 6 months. It has been so rich and so full and just permeating every aspect of my life. Some of the people in this room have been a significant part of that journey of making me feel truly loved and seen for who I am, not for what I do for them, not for how I perform, not whether or not I impress. And it has been a time of healing and transformation to have that experience. And what I noticed is that the very thing I wanted so deeply, I had all along. And so often we chase after something that's right in front of us, and that's exactly what I was doing. I had love my whole life, and I was missing it because I was looking for it in everything else. We cannot become who we are meant to be by remaining what we are. We have to be committed to transformation and to growing. It's really important that we don't get caught up in this hiding and that we can give ourselves permission to move away from that. That all of us are capable of evolving and growing in some way. And so what I've realized is this, that when we can give people permission to be themselves, to belong to something bigger and to connect, and to become who they were meant to be, we experience love. That's what that is. It's an experience of love. We come out of hiding and we remove our masks and we show up fully as we are. We invite companies to transform into communities that people are proud to be a part of. And we turn organizations into a force for goodness and kindness that embraces people and invites them to become all that they are meant to be. Thank you.